My challenge in this two-part presentation is going to be to play the role of the forest. I'm going to take the view of someone who's looking at a forest. Ying's role will be to take the role of someone who's looking at the trees. So I'm going to start out by giving you an overview of what are asset and wealth data sets that people collect regularly for the purpose of studying assets or wealth. And I'm also then going to give you some of the facts and explain why some of the issues that I talk about become issues. And Ying Li will take over and then discuss some of the data that you can get at the community level. And she'll end up giving you a demonstration on the web about using one of these data sets, which is the American Community Survey. So that's the way we're going to operate. Okay, so I'm going to start by giving you the overview, and I'm going to start by asking a very basic question. Why do we care about asset or wealth data, or in other words, what are we trying to measure here? And essentially what we're trying to measure is wealth. And so what is wealth? Wealth is net worth, or the value of one's assets after you have subtracted the value of debts that they might own. Now, assets, at least in the USA, are defined as either being housing equity or non-housing equity. And the reason for that is housing equity is the major source of wealth for everybody in the USA. So housing equity is set off sort of separately. And then there's the non-housing equity, that's the other forms of wealth. And generally, those other forms of wealth are defined as either financial assets or tangible assets. So what do we mean when we're looking at wealth data and we're looking at the financial assets? We're looking at things like liquid assets, money that you might have in a checking account or in a credit union account. We're talking about stocks, mutual fund shares, bonds, IRAs, KIOs, or other interest-earning assets. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about financial assets, and that's the kind of data that we would hope to be able to find if we're going to measure total wealth, total assets that someone holds. Now, when we talk about tangible assets, not only do we mean housing, which I said was set off in a separate sort of category because of the major share of wealth that it constitutes, but we're also talking about things like equity in motor vehicles, and equity in a motor vehicle in itself might be an oxymoron, because as soon as you drive your car off the dealer's lot, it has started to depreciate. But still, it is one of the most commonly owned assets. Virtually, well, very large shares of all populations own automobiles, and therefore it is considered an asset. By the way this country has been structured in the economic sense, that means you're oversampling a white population, because they are the population that by and large has many different forms of wealth in very many different forms. So even though the Survey of Consumer Finances is considered the gold standard, its data for people of color is not the best. In fact, in their published documents, they report data for two groups mainly, whites, and then they lump black and Hispanics together, and they have a category black or Hispanic. So that's the way that they generally want you to use data, because their sampling is not robust enough, or because the way their survey was structured, it doesn't let you capture people of color as well. Now, the final survey I'll say anything about is the SIP. And I mention it because it's conducted by the Census Bureau, and it's a survey whose population of interest is low-income households eligible for government assistance. So by that definition, you could infer that they're going to have data on a lot of populations of color, and that's true. But on the other hand, the survey does not have a lot of wealth data, and the reason is because they've got populations who are getting government assistance in many cases, and because they have had to spend down their assets so they could qualify. So, you know, it's a dual-edged sword there. So I will stop at this point and turn the podium over to Ying Lee, who will discuss the most robust community-level data set for assets and wealth, which is the American Community Survey. Thank you.
ACS is an ongoing survey. It's conducted by the Census Bureau. Each year, about 3 million housing units are interviewed. So that's about 2% of the total population in US. So in the United States, about 47% of households responded by questionnaire, and about 10% do the phone interview, and about 40% that the Census Bureau has to send someone to the household. So the response rate is very high. ACS has about 98% response rate, so it's very reliable. I use 3 major tools to access ACS. The first one is American Fact Finder. This is for beginners. You can just go to the census website, and in a few minutes you will get a community profile, and you will see the property value. But this does not give you customized tabulations, like you cannot get property value by the race or Hispanic origin of the homeowner. So the second one, Data Ferret, is developed by the Census Bureau, but it takes maybe a few months to get used to it. And lastly, the IPUMS, Integrated Public Use Microdata Series. This is produced by the Minnesota Population Center. It's a really nice data series. And if you want to run regression analysis, correlations, or you want to see trends, so I would recommend download the raw data set and play with it. The census website is www.census.gov.
The point about whether one uses median or mean.
In low-income
areas.
Yeah,
I mean, I think if you're in an area where there's not likely to be a Bill Gates kind of person living, or there's not likely to be, you know, very low or very high values, those are what really throw the mean off and make it different from what the median is. It's a general bias toward using median because I think that tends to knock out any problems that you might have with values that are either very high or very low. If you can be confident that low-income neighborhoods are likely to all have values that are very close to one another, then you're okay. But I can think of examples where that wouldn't be the case. I can think of inner city neighborhoods that are starting to be rediscovered and you find there's a lot of turnover, and you find people are moving in and bidding up prices. So I think using median as a general rule to control for that is a good idea, to control for the possibility of that. And given some of the problems that I noted with having data in an infrequent way, you know, not getting it every year, I think it's probably better to stick with median, even though you are working in neighborhoods that you expect to be low income. I can think of many low income neighborhoods that were low income 20 years ago and aren't now. So, you know.
At this level of detail, do states also make data sets available? It seems like something that might be available in a particular state. Do you know?
Depends. California might have something. New York. But this ACS is the most comprehensive survey of the United States at the community level. Oh, okay.
I actually had two questions. One, do you know of any good primers or how-tos or guides to using Data Ferret? Because I've tried to use it before. I guess I'm not an intermediate data user. I've had a little bit of trouble. And the second question, you said that ISR charges a fee for the PSID access to be broken down into geographic categories. Just kind of curious if that fee is like $20 or like $2,000.
Data Ferret. Okay. Call me when you have questions. Okay. I
will hold you to that.
I have been using Data Ferret for about 5 years, so there are a lot of tricks you have to know. So how did you learn about Data Ferret? Where did you learn?
I just ran into a link for it when I was doing census data research, just using census data, and I kept seeing Data Ferret over and over again, and it was recommended by a lot of libraries, so I played around with it a little bit, and I found it a bit difficult.
They have tutorials online, but probably the best way is just call me if you have a question.
Okay. Thank you.
To the other part of your question, how much the Institute of Social Research makes you pay to access the PSID, the fee is $750. I think it's for a one-time use. I mean, no, let me clear that up. What I mean is you have to fill out a contract that has terms of use, what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to, you know, all of that. And along with that contract, you have to submit a $750 fee. Now, I am pretty sure there's a way that you can be very clever and very strategic about what you put into your contract in terms of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, et cetera. They don't have you do annual fee type stuff, but it's for usage. So, you know, short answer is you would have to look at the way their contract is specified and see if there's a way you can write it to get the biggest bang for your buck. People differ in how scrupulous they want to be in terms of writing what they've done in their source notes, but the way I would do it is to say, speaking for me, if I had done it, joint center data tabulations from U.S. Census Bureau 2005, 2009 American Community Survey, because that makes it clear that this is me, or this is the joint center crunching those numbers and also giving what the data source is. Because people use things and misuse them and misread them and whatever. So if you make it clear that this is data from this source, but you tabulated it.
So you mentioned the challenges with finding race-based data, race ethnicity data for a lot of these data sets. And I was wondering if I could dig one level deeper into that and talk about disaggregating Asian American API data. Do you know of any of the data sets that might have a little bit more information than others?
ACS has it, but you have to use Data Ferret.
data for Asian subgroups or Asians period is always a challenge. And one of the things you can look for is sample surveys done in places where there are large populations of specific Asian groups. For instance, if there's sample surveys done in San Francisco or Hawaii or other places around the country, even New York City, you are likely to find enough representation in those surveys. Now, there are lots of people around the country doing their own surveys. They're doing them for different purposes. They're using different methods to collect their data. But that's one way that you can possibly get some information that you wouldn't have to learn how to use Data Ferret for, or that you could get more ready access to.
You can also have Hispanic subgroups from Data Ferret.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I have a question about data for rural areas with small population size. I was going to say 10 years ago, but I think it was actually 15 years ago. I'm in denial. I was working at I was working at a Rural Policy Research Institute, and they were rolling out the American Community Survey. And we wrote a white paper on our concerns regarding the large margin of error for very remote rural areas that have low population. So you're interviewing, say, 5 or 10 people in the community, and then you're generalizing it to all rural areas of similar population size. I don't know, has that changed over time? Can you talk a little bit about the margin of error when you're looking at a small community, a small rural community? How reliable is the data? How accurate is the data?
I know the Census Bureau has heard about concerns on rural communities, and I know they have a program about rural statistics, but other than that, I don't know. But the margin error in the handbook in your package that talks about the margin error, how to work with margin errors. I would say if the margin error is more than 10% of the estimates, just take caution. They are not really that reliable. If its margin error is 10% or more of the estimates.
Last week, I was at a conference where someone from a group called Social Compact presented information about the under and over count associated with the census from 2000 and what they thought would probably be a similar overcount or undercount from the 2010 census. And they indicated that they had, through various sources, done what they called a drill down in a variety of cities where they had used things like, water bills and things like that to try to determine to what extent there was an under and over count. And in one community here in Washington, in Columbia Heights, they came up with something like a 12% undercount for the last census. I guess I was just wondering if you are familiar with this, if this is a well-known, Social Compact's work is well-known, and if so, if you've had any experience with it. And
I have never heard of a social compact, but the Census Bureau has a division to deal with undercount and overcounts. And the Joint Center Senior Fellow, Dr. Roderick Harrison, he used to head the Census Bureau's racial statistic branch. He testified before the 2010 census about the undercounts. So, and the Census Bureau has, before 2010 census, they had a database that's showing in the nation which areas are consistently undercounted. And so that's a lot of information, the database.
it just strikes me that kind of issue is really important for the advocacy work that we're trying to develop here, because there's billions of dollars of federal funds that are based upon the census enumerations, to say nothing about reapportionment and so on. So Okay, well, thank
They
you.
are going to have another data set for after this, maybe a few years after the data release, and they are going to have a data set for undercounted and overcounted areas. And they do checks after they collected the questionnaire. They do checks. They do samples in certain areas to see how accurate people are reporting the numbers.